Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition.
And Mr. Filner, is that true, sir?
Yes, sir.
And counsel, do you concur?
Yes, sir.
Guilty as charged, former San Diego Mayor Bob Filner admits to battery for sexually harassing 3 women while in office. We'll take a closer look at the criminal charges.
I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, our analysis of Bob Filner's plea bargain and what happens next. Plus, a local wildlife center may be forced to close due to financial troubles. What's at stake, and where do the animals go if the center closes?
And we take a closer look at how San Diego mayoral candidate Nathan Fletcher voted during his time in the state assembly, what his voting record says and doesn't say about the former Republican turned independent, now Democrat. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Weeks after he was forced to resign over sexual harassment allegations, today former San Diego Mayor Bob Filner was back in front of the cameras. During his court hearing, Filner pleaded guilty to 3 criminal charges. They include a felony and 2 misdemeanors for unwanted physical contact with 3 women. The incidents happened at public events, one at a fundraiser, another at a Meet the Mayor event at City Hall. And as to the third?
Yes, Your Honor. As to count 3, the defendant, Mr. Filner, is admitting that on or about May 25th, 2013, the defendant, Robert Earl Filner, attended a Fiesta Island rally and cleanup event in San Diego in his capacity as the mayor. Jane Doe 3 approached him and asked if she could take a picture with him. Just before the picture was taken, the defendant grabbed Jane Doe 3's buttock. The touching was willful and unlawful, against Jane Doe 3's will and without her consent.
All right, and sir, is that true?
Yes, sir.
The guilty plea was all part of a deal with the State Attorney General's office. Peggy Pico takes a closer look at the charges and punishment he faces.
Here with a closer look at the Bob Filner plea bargain and the punishment he faces is KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma. Amitha, you were in the courtroom today when the mayor formally entered his plea. Break down for us the seriousness of these charges.
Well, Bob Filner pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony false imprisonment and 2 counts of misdemeanor battery. The false imprisonment involved Bob Filner restraining a woman against her will. This has become known as the Filner headlock. The 2 misdemeanor battery charges involve Filner kissing a woman without her permission. In another case, he patted a woman on, or actually grabbed a woman on her backside, again against her wishes.
What are the terms of this plea bargain agreement?
The terms are that Filner will be on in home confinement. He'll be confined to his house for 3 months. He'll be on probation for 3 years, during which he must undergo psychological treatment, during which also he cannot vote. He will also not be able to accrue, he won't be able to collect any accrual in his pension from the day that the felony was committed back in March of this year.
So his pension as mayor. What about as far as fines go, anything like that? Will that be determined?
Well, one more thing. If he violates the terms of this agreement, he could go to jail for up to 6 months. He will have to pay court costs, restitution, etc. Now, this agreement has not been formalized. It will be formalized in December before
And then what happens next? Before that happens, he actually has to come back and actually take a mugshot, right?
So later this month, he'll be formally booked, have a mugshot taken, and then released to probation.
Okay, and he's not allowed to run for office either. Is that forever or just during his probation?
This is forever. He cannot run for office again. And again, we're talking about a man who served as a city councilman, who was on the school board, who was a 10-term congressman, and the former mayor of a very large city.
Okay, and I do have to say that Bob Filner's attorney did make a statement about this outside of the courtroom today. Let's listen.
I think he's a much more humbled man, in my own personal view, from the first time I met him early in this. I think this is to start out with something that he did not realize was as bad as it was perceived by other people. and the rehabilitation. He's got ongoing counseling going on. Having to go through this process, I don't think any one of you ever want to enter a guilty plea in a court. It's a very sobering event.
So he admitted in court. He admitted, according to his attorney, and according to you. Why do you think Filner pleaded guilty to these charges? Why not say, no comment, or I'm not pleading either way?
Well, let's go back to the summertime when these allegations of sexual harassment first publicly surfaced against Filner. One by one, women came out before the cameras and spoke and described, in one form or another, sexual misconduct allegations against Bob Filner. So all of this was established in the public record. There were around 20 women who made their stories public. It was going to be a very daunting task for Bob Filner to allow these cases, at least these 3 charges that he was presented with today, to go forward because of what had been established in the public record. There was a pattern. And then also, in the words of Filner's defense attorney, Jerry Coughlin, there was a strong desire by Filner to put this behind him and to work on his rehabilitation. We're talking about a man who believes he has a legacy as a freedom rider back in the 1960s, as a 10-term congressman, and he did not want his recent conduct to sully that reputation. Now, whether it sullies his reputation is very much up to the public, and I think a lot of people believe that reputation has been damaged beyond repair.
A lot of people, that was going to be my next question, because a lot of politicians, it's nothing new, get caught up in a scandal or something happens and they recovered. Do you think there's any chance of that if he moved away from San Diego, perhaps back in D.C., perhaps someplace else, or do you think it was just across the board that he probably won't be able to recover his reputation from this?
I think because this scandal, the allegations against him were so pervasive and so repetitive, and the fact that this case got so much national attention, it got international attention, I think public rehabilitation, if he wanted to surface or resurface for maybe working as an analyst for a think tank, I think it would be difficult. I think it would be hard for the public to swallow the rehabilitation of Bob Filner. But
you
the
never
public
know.
can be
It's
fickle. Yes, it's happened before.
All right, KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma, thank you.
Thank you.
The Sheriff's Department is closing its investigation into sexual harassment complaints against Filner. There were 5 detectives working on the case, and the tip line received over 200 calls. Detectives conducted 90 interviews with alleged victims or witnesses, but most were affected by the statute of limitations. Local and state elected officials are also reacting tonight to Filner's guilty plea. Attorney General Kamala Harris said, quote, Filner's conduct was not only criminal, it was an extreme abuse of power. No one is above the law. And San Diego's top prosecutor, Bonnie Dumanis, echoed what the Attorney General said and added, quote, abuse of women won't be tolerated and victims will be treated with respect when they come forward. And Interim Mayor Todd Gloria is eager to move forward. He said, quote, today's guilty plea is another step in that direction and confirmation this unfortunate chapter in our city's history will soon be behind us. Analysis of the thousands of votes former Assembly member Nathan Fletcher cast shows he voted down the middle more often than not. But what the data doesn't reveal is whether Fletcher is willing to break from party ranks because he values compromise or whether he's voting to secure his political future. iNewsSource reporter Joanne Farian has been looking into Fletcher's legislative record as part of our in-depth coverage of the mayor's race. She joins me now. Joanne, tell us more about this study.
Well, it turns out a political scientist at the University of Chicago by the name of Boris Shore has been tracking the voting record of every legislator in the country and plotting just how partisan they are. Fletcher was an assemblyman between 2008 and 2012. We asked Professor Shore to plot Nathan Fletcher's voting record on his partisan grid and compare him with other assembly members from San Diego. Now take a look. The assembly members on the left are, of course, Democrats. On the right, Republicans. You can see the most conservative San Diego Republicans are Brian Jones and Brian Mainshine. On the other side, the most liberal Democrats include Lori Saldana and Tony Atkins. Nathan Fletcher is almost in the middle. He was, according to the analysis of more than 2,000 votes, the most liberal Republican in the state assembly during that time period. I sat down with Fletcher and asked him about what his voting record says about him.
I think it puts me right where most San Diegans are. Somewhere between the extremes on each end. And I think that's where most folks are. And I think that's where most folks would like to see their mayor.
So given that if you just look at data, you are somewhere in the middle. Right. You know, you don't fit into either party. Why become a Democrat?
Well, I wrote, and you should look at, we can send it to you on my Facebook page. I mean, I wrote about, 3,500 words explaining it. But at the end of the day, parties are a reflection of values, and they're a reflection of beliefs. And when I left the Republican Party, and I had a period of time in between, it became increasingly clear that free from the constraints of party, that I was very consistently voting more Democratic, supporting candidates that were more Democratic. And along that same time frame, I had a lot of folks who really encouraged me and welcomed me in. You know, Jess Durfee, the former chairman of the party, wrote a letter saying, hey, we think you're one of us. The Speaker of the Assembly, John Perez, did a series of things. Congressman Juan Vargas did a series of meetings. He said, look, you're one of us. We want you. You know, you're not perfect, but we think that you have our values and our commitment. Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez was someone as well. And so I think a lot of those folks really welcomed and helped me in. And I am comfortable as a Democrat. It's where I belong, and it's where I'll stay. But I'm always going to be someone that's willing to do what I think is right for the city as a whole, and not toe a party line just because that's the party line. And I think we need more of that in politics. If we had more people doing that, our government wouldn't be shut down in Washington, D.C.
Critics argue that you had to join a party in order to win a big race.
Well, my critics argue all kinds of things. I mean, we could spend a lot of time.
Is there truth to that? Could you have won? Last year we saw you didn't win it. You couldn't make it past the primary as an independent. Did you need a party in this race in order to make it further?
Well, first off, I don't think anyone anticipated this race occurring. I mean, anyone who predicted what happened with Mayor Filner really should be buying lottery tickets, because they have an amazing ability to tell the future. So I don't know that, but I joined a party that I believe best reflects my values and where I belong, and where I'm most comfortable. I do think in general there's a difficulty, of someone who's independent, in that it doesn't say anything, it doesn't communicate any values, and that doesn't mean that individual independents don't. That's been mistaken a great deal, but I do think, for me at least, it was clear which party I was most comfortable in, and the party that I belonged in, the party I best fit.
I want to pick up on what you just said, because one of the things that Professor Shore had said is that it is so unusual for someone to, first of all, not vote within the party, and it's very unusual for someone to leave a party. And he said, what this tells me, after years of looking at this, that basically politicians are ideologues, right? So they hold fast to something they believe in. So an optimist, he says, could say about you, well, no, you're voting with with your heart. You're looking at each one. Or a critic could say, well, maybe you don't believe in anything, and maybe these votes are cast more with political motivation. How do you convince the public, the voter, that obviously you'd like them to think it's the first and not the second? How do you convince them of that?
Well, I'm an optimist. I am an optimist, but I think Kennedy had a great line. He said, "I'm an idealist without illusion," and I never have a problem with someone who says, "I can't support what you're doing because I'm principally opposed to that." I always respect that. I respect that. But a lot of what we get in politics today, and this is where I say without illusion, is people who use the mantra of party to play political games. And so they'll say, look, that's the right thing to do. That's the right compromise. It's the right thing for the city. It's the right thing for the state. I get it. I said, well, let's do it. I can't. Because my party, for some other reason that's not tied to principle, wants that to happen. And I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that, regardless of the party.
And you can read more about Fletcher's record and see more of that interview at kpbs.org.
The Supreme Court today rejected California's appeal over prison overcrowding. The ruling means the High Court will not stand in the way of a lower court order requiring the state to cut its prison population by thousands of inmates. Governor Brown has argued it would pose a major public safety risk. The decision comes as state officials are in settlement talks with inmates' attorneys over crowding issues. A new survey of the fast food industry finds low wages are taking a huge bite out of taxpayer wallets. Joining me to talk about the UC Berkeley report is KPBS business and environment reporter Eric Anderson. Eric, it sounds like the $200 billion fast food industry isn't cutting it when it comes to worker paychecks.
Right, Dwayne. The study that came out of UC Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education found that the average wage of a fast food worker was about $8.69 an hour. And with low wages and not many benefits, the industry puts economic pressure on municipalities. The study found that more than half of fast food workers needed public assistance to balance their families' finances. That's twice the rate of people in other industries. And the Center for Policy Initiatives' Peter Brunel says that cost taxpayers $7 billion.
Obviously, the report really highlights the cost to taxpayers, and taxpayers are footing the bill for these benefits that workers really need to make ends meet, given how low the wages that are being paid to them by their employers are.
The report estimates that California pays about $717 million a year to help out people working in the fast food industry.
And any other interesting findings in the study?
Well, a couple of things. 2/3 of fast food workers are older than 20, so it's not just teenagers working those jobs. In fact, nearly 68% of the workers are the main earners in their family, and a quarter of them are raising children. Worker advocates say the best way to fix the problem is to raise the wages of fast food workers, and they say the state's newly approved higher minimum wage is a start.
KPBS business and environment reporter Eric Anderson. The Covered California Health Insurance Exchange is open for business. What are its rules, though, on coverage for domestic partners? Joining me with this week's Second Opinion is Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks. Well, Megan, this is the third week the insurance exchanges have been open now. You must be getting a lot of questions about how they work.
Yes, this week's question comes from Jacques Eicher. He's a mechanical engineer from Switzerland, and he lives in Cardiff with his domestic partner, who's a woman. The company he works for does not provide insurance for domestic partners. So Eicher wants to know if she can be covered through the state's insurance exchange, Covered California. Here's his question.
Yeah, so my question was how they're going to calculate the household income. I mean, I understand if people are married, it's going to be kind of both salaries, but if you're not, like we are in like a domestic partnership, then how are they going to calculate this?
Yeah, does the insurance exchange take into account both incomes when calculating the subsidy?
So this is a tricky one. Married couple, including those in same-sex marriages, can apply on Covered California as a single household. So both incomes are taken into account. Same-sex domestic partners cannot file taxes jointly with the IRS. So Covered California has had to get a little creative. Same-sex partners will have to shop the exchanges separately. Their subsidies would be based on half of their combined income. So a simple example, if one partner makes $40,000 and the other makes $20,000, both would tell Covered California that their income is $30,000.
And in this case, what does that mean for Eicher and his partner?
So it gets even trickier. The state does not recognize opposite-sex domestic partners, only marriages. That means that their relationship won't come into play at all. Eicher's partner can apply on the health exchange as an individual. Whether she qualifies for subsidies depends on her income alone. A good rule of thumb here, if you file federal taxes together, you'll shop the exchange together. If you file separately, you'll shop separately.
And to ask your questions about Obamacare, go to kpbs.org/secondopinion. A South Bay wildlife refuge and aquarium is facing closure for the second time in 4 years. But as Peggy Pico finds out, the community is coming together to keep it open.
The 28-year-old Living Coast Discovery Center, formerly the Chula Vista Nature Center, is 6 miles south of downtown on the Sweetwater Marsh National Wildlife Refuge. The aquarium is $200,000 in the hole and is asking for the public's help to keep its doors open. Here from the Discovery Center are Sherry Langston and Blue, a burrowing owl. Welcome to you both.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's not often I get to welcome an owl onto the set. Tell us a little bit more about Blue and why he's here today.
Yeah, so Blue is a burrowing owl. They're native to the San Diego region. And that's something that we focus on at the Living Coast Discovery Center, our animals that we have right here in our backyard. And Blue's with us as an educational ambassador. Gets to come out and meet and greet with people and talk to kids and really get them interested in our native wildlife here.
And an educational ambassador, education is important to the center.
Absolutely.
How many visitors do you get, including students?
We have about 70,000 visitors a year, plus or minus a couple. And then about 15,000 of those are students for their field trips each year.
And I understand the center needs $200,000 to stay open by the end of this month if they want to stay open. Tell us how the center is funded and how you got to needing the $200,000.
$200,000, right. So we transitioned over from being a city-owned organization back in 2009. The city of Chula Vista originally owned the Discovery Center. It used to be called the Chula Vista Nature Center. We took it over in 2009, and we've had to, close that funding gap from going from publicly funded to a privately funded organization as a 501c3 nonprofit. So in that, our funding comes from our memberships, admissions, daily admissions, but also a lot of grant funding for educational programs. And that $200,000 mark, we're really looking to push forward with our Bright New Future. We have a sustainability and strategic plan in place right now that we've been working towards. And that $200,000 will not only allow us to keep our doors open to the public, but will actually give us a push to move into that sustainable future that we need.
And you've done pretty well with donations so far. Here, this is your ambassador, maybe your donor ambassador. Tell us how much you need to go to keep it open.
So last week we were around $53,000 that we had raised from SDG&E. Made a really wonderful grant of $25,000. It was great.
Okay.
And then, with other donations, we'd gotten up to about 53. Now, however, we've actually had a couple of private donors and foundations come through, some of them anonymous, that have given us some contingent pledges, meaning if we make that $200,000 goal, we'll be able to, keep their money and
so
use
how
it for
short
funding.
are you right at the moment?
Well, right now we're at $160.
So about $40,000
so
to go.
we're really, really close.
Speaking of SDG&E, I understand they gave a $2 million endowment to the center. How come you can't use that money?
So that's actually still pending. That wasn't something we were really planning on or expecting to come through anytime soon. So that really isn't any part of this equation that we have going on right now.
How sustainable? Let's say you make the $200,000, and we certainly hope you do. How sustainable is that? Is there going to be this gap all the way along? Is there something that caused it?
Actually, so we have right now about $750,000 worth of pending grants that we've applied for, and we're waiting for it to actually come through in that process. Grant funding can take, to have it actually go through the approval process and actually be funded, 3, 6, sometimes 12 months to go through that cycle. And so that's why we're at this deficit right now of that $200,000, just to make sure we can push through.
So are those some of the options? Are there other options to keeping the center open without relying on the donations?
Absolutely, yeah. We need that $200,000 to come through by the end of the month, or we have to start making some really tough decisions. We need to be responsible to our animals as well as the education programs that we currently have in place. So if we're not able to make that 200 mark by October, then we have to start making some of those hard decisions and progressing with the closing plan.
Well, we're looking really hi. How are you, Blue? What's going to happen to Blue and the animals if this center were to close?
Well, if the absolute most unfortunate thing happened and we would have to close our doors to the public, we are working on finding them long-term, homes for them, the best homes that we can. So we've had people say, well, what if I make this donation now and you're not able to stay open? Well, whatever donation you've made will be used towards, for the animals to make sure they don't just get a home, they get the best home that we can find for them.
All right. Sherry Langston and Blue, the burrowing owl. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much. You're just chilling out.
Don't know if you know about this one. A San Diego catering company has been playing a crucial role in providing food to many well-known venues, from national political conventions to the Super Bowl and 7 of the past Olympic Games. Behind-the-scenes catering in Mira Mesa operates on a local and global scale. It may not look like an international powerhouse from the outside, but behind-the-scenes catering and events is a real mover and shaker in the entertainment and sports arenas, serving the discriminating tastes of the broadcast media as well as corporate and private clients for over 20 years.
People are, like I said, they're very particular, and so we're catering to people's likes and dislikes, and sometimes for extended periods of time. And so you got to be creative in how you approach that.
John Crisafulli has been dabbling in the catering business since he was 14, and he and his late sister Teresa bought the company for $25,000 in 1990. It's now a $10 million a year enterprise, but one thing that hasn't changed is people's personal opinion on how a dish should be prepared.
Even when we were over in Italy working on the Olympic Games in Italy, we were getting complaints from one particular production manager because we weren't cooking the pasta like his mama cooked it. So
behind the scenes, catering has been awarded another contract for the Winter Olympics in Russia and Summer Games in Rio. Countries with limited local resources available, so they'll have to import nearly 95% of the food, beverages, and supplies.
There's small corner markets in the Sochi and Adler area where the games are, but not anything that we were used to. So there's no running down to the local Vons to pick up some produce.
Tomorrow we'll look at the logistical challenge of getting everything in place for the Winter Games.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, the latest on a possible deal to end the shutdown, plus Jim Lehrer on his new novel. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
We will be under a mild Santa Ana the next few days. Pleasant temperatures, mostly sunny at the beaches, 70s. Sunny in the 80s for the inland valleys. Mild temperatures in the mountain areas with highs in the upper 60s. Even pleasant in the desert. Temperatures there mostly in the 80s. You can find tonight's stories and download them from kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.